She thought she opened the wrong hospital door, but inside, a billionaire with lonely blue eyes whispered, "Stay, I've been waiting for you." What began as a mistake turned into the most beautiful love story, proving that sometimes the wrong path leads us to the right person. Don't miss this heart-melting story of Natasha, a humble nurse trainee, and Mickelson, a billionaire who found love where he least expected it. Natasha James clutched the tray of medicine tightly against her chest, her knuckles turning pale from the pressure. Her shoes clicked lightly against the polished hospital floor, yet the sound echoed in her head like a drum beat. She was only 6 months into her training, and already every shift felt like a test she might fail. The long hallway stretched out like a maze, lined with identical doors, each one marked by silver numbers. Natasha's heart beat faster as she searched for the correct room. She hated the idea of patients waiting on her, hated the thought of making a mistake. Tonight was supposed to be simple, but her nerves betrayed her. Her eyes landed on the number 301, shining faintly in the soft hospital light. She released a shaky breath. Finally. The right one, she thought. Without hesitation, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air in the room was different, quieter, heavier. A small lamp by the bedside table glowed, casting golden shadows across the walls. The smell of antiseptic lingered, but there was also something else, something warmer, like the faint trace of cologne that hadn't yet faded. Her gaze shifted to the bed. A tall man lay there, his shoulders broad even beneath the hospital gown. A clear tube ran along his arm, but his eyes were not closed like she expected. They were open, wide, sharp, and piercing blue. Natasha's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected to meet such eyes tonight, not here. They didn't look weak, even though his body was resting. They looked alive. Alive in a way that made her heart stumble inside her chest. Her feet froze against the floor, and her voice broke through the silence in a whisper. I'm sorry, I think I... She stepped back, ready to retreat, embarrassed by her mistake. But then a sound filled the room, a voice, low, deep, and commanding in a way that made her skin tingle. Stay. Just one word, but it stopped her in place. She turned slowly, unsure if she had heard him right. His lips curved, just slightly, and then he whispered again, his voice carrying both strength and longing. Stay, I've been waiting for you. Her heart thudded against her ribs so hard she thought he might hear it. Waiting for her? How could that be? She had never seen this man before in her life. Her mind spun with questions. Who was he? Why did his words sound less like a request and more like destiny calling her name? The tray in her hands trembled, but she couldn't move. Something about his gaze held her captive. It wasn't just the intensity of his eyes, it was the loneliness behind them, the unspoken story they carried. She swallowed, her lips dry. Do I know you? She asked softly. For a moment, silence filled the space between them, heavy but strangely comforting. The lamp's glow touched his face, highlighting the sharp lines of his jaw, the faint shadow of stubble and the sadness that lingered beneath his calm exterior. Finally, his lips parted. Not yet, he said, his tone filled with certainty. But you will. Natasha's pulse raced. She should leave. She should apologize again and walk out the door. But her legs refused to obey. Every instinct told her this was a mistake, yet her heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't. The room felt less like a hospital chamber now, and more like a doorway into something unknown, something terrifying, and something that already felt impossible to walk away from. Her wrong turn had led her here. And deep down, Natasha wondered if it was wrong at all, or if fate itself had just guided her into the most important moment of her life. The silence between them stretched, heavy and unbroken, until the man finally spoke again. His voice carried authority, but also a weariness that only someone who had lived in shadows of power could carry. My name, he paused, as though even saying it carried weight, is Mickelson Smith. Natasha blinked. The name struck her instantly. Of course she had heard it before. Who in the city hadn't? He was the billionaire behind one of the largest corporations, a man painted by the world as untouchable. People whispered about his fortune, his ruthless decisions, his cold, emotionless heart. And yet, looking at him now, he didn't resemble the legend she had heard about. He wasn't the mighty figure seen in photographs or business magazines. He wasn't the cold, sharp image of power people described. Here, in this dimly lit hospital room, Mickelson Smith looked like nothing more than a man, human, fragile, and heartbreakingly alone. His blue eyes never left hers. "Strange, isn't it?" he murmured. "The world believes I have everything, but all I have is emptiness. People come to me for money, for favors, for business, and when they leave, I'm left with silence." Natasha's chest tightened. His words carried a weight no news story ever told. Behind the image of the powerful billionaire was a soul starving for something real. "I don't know why you walked into this room," he continued, softer this time, "but I feel like I was waiting for you." Natasha's breath hitched, her heart tripping over itself. She wanted to argue, to tell him she was just a trainee nurse who had walked into the wrong room. But her voice betrayed her, lost somewhere between shock and a strange pull she couldn't understand. He inhaled shakily, his chest rising beneath the thin hospital gown. "Every nurse, every doctor, they come and go. Their smiles are polite, their words practiced. But when you entered, something inside me—" His voice broke slightly, and he closed his eyes as though gathering the courage to finish. "Felt alive again." Natasha felt her knees weaken. The tray she still carried seemed weightless compared to the emotions pressing against her heart. She should have excused herself. She should have stepped back, said, "I'm sorry," and walked out. That would have been the professional thing to do. That would have been safe. But her feet didn't move. Instead, her pulse beat louder in her ears, and her gaze remained locked on him. There was something in his tone, an ache that matched something buried inside her own heart. His confession was not just strange, it was unsettling, dangerous even, because a part of her wanted to believe him. A part of her felt that her wrong turn had not been wrong at all. The weight of fate hung in the air, pressing between them, tightening the space until it felt almost impossible to breathe. Finally, Natasha whispered, her voice trembling, "Why me?" Mickelson's lips curved into the faintest, almost broken smile. "Because when I looked at you, the emptiness inside me finally felt less heavy. Her chest ached." In that moment, she realized she wasn't staring at the billionaire the world admired or feared. She was staring at a man stripped of his walls, a man carrying a secret so simple yet so powerful, even the richest hearts can be the loneliest. And just like that, Natasha knew. Her wrong turn had led her straight into the heart of a secret no one else had ever seen. The days passed, and Natasha thought she could forget room 301. She told herself it was just a wrong door, just an accident that had led her into Mickelson Smith's world. But each evening, as her shift neared its end, her steps betrayed her. Her heart carried her back to that room even when her schedule did not. She told herself it was kindness, nothing more. After all, every patient deserved comfort. That's what being a nurse meant, caring for people, giving them moments of warmth in places that felt cold. But deep inside, she knew the truth. It wasn't just kindness pulling her back. It was something heavier, deeper, something she dared not name. Each time she entered room 301, Mickelson's eyes lit up, and it startled her. Those piercing blue eyes, once filled with emptiness, now softened at the mere sight of her. He didn't need to say anything. The silence itself spoke volumes. One night, she sat at the edge of his bed, her voice quiet but steady. She told him about her struggles, how she had grown up with little, how she had worked endless shifts to pay for her schooling, how exhaustion often whispered in her bones but never broke her spirit. To her surprise, Mickelson didn't interrupt, didn't dismiss her words. He listened, truly listened. His eyes stayed fixed on her face, his expression patient, as though every word she shared was a treasure. For the first time in her life, she felt like her story mattered. And then it was his turn. He leaned back against the pillow, his gaze distant as he confessed pieces of his life few had ever heard. He spoke of boardrooms and deals, of empires built with sweat and sharp decisions. But when his voice lowered, Natasha heard the truth hidden beneath his success. "Money fills rooms," he murmured, his eyes heavy with sorrow. "But it can't fill silence. I have everything people dream of, yet when the nights grow quiet, I have no one. I've been surrounded by people all my life, yet not one of them has ever truly stayed." Natasha's chest tightened. His words wrapped around her heart like invisible chains, pulling her closer to his pain. She had always imagined billionaires as untouchable, their lives glittering with luxury. But sitting here, she saw something different. She saw a man weighed down by loneliness so heavy it could break him. Every word he spoke dripped with longing. Every pause carried years of hidden wounds. His voice was steady, but his heart sounded fragile. And Natasha, without meaning to, felt something inside her shift. She wanted to reach across the silence. She wanted to heal the hurt he carried. When the room fell quiet again, she didn't rush to fill it with words. Instead, she let the silence linger, because it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with something unspoken, something delicate and new. She realized that what bound them together wasn't just conversation. It was the silence, the way it no longer felt lonely when they shared it. And in that silence, Natasha knew something frightening and beautiful at once. She wasn't just caring for a patient anymore, she was falling into something far deeper, something her heart had never known before. The hospital was unusually still that night. The usual hum of voices and footsteps had faded, leaving only the faint sound of machines humming in distant rooms. Natasha carried her clipboard, moving quietly through the hallway. But when she reached room 301, her steps halted. The door was slightly ajar and light spilled into the hallway. She frowned, her heartbeat quickening. Slowly, she pushed it open, and her breath caught. Mickelson was not in bed. Instead, he stood by the tall window, his frame outlined by the pale glow of city lights. His hospital gown draped loosely over his shoulders, and his posture looked unsteady, his body too weak to be upright. Yet he refused to sit. Her voice trembled as she stepped closer. "What are you doing?" she whispered, worry flooding her tone. "You should be resting." He didn't turn at first. His hand rested on the window frame, knuckles white as though holding himself up by sheer will. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost broken. "I'm afraid." The words shocked her. Billionaires weren't supposed to admit fear. Men like Mickelson Smith were supposed to be fearless, unshaken by life. But his voice carried the honesty of a man stripped of every shield. She swallowed hard, stepping closer. "Afraid? Of what?" Slowly he turned his head, his piercing blue eyes finding hers. For the first time she saw no wall, no mask, only raw vulnerability. "I'm afraid you'll walk out of here one day and forget me." Her chest tightened, her breath stolen by the confession. For a moment she couldn't speak. She wasn't supposed to be here like this. She was a trainee nurse, a simple woman trying to make her way in the world. He was a billionaire, powerful, untouchable, a man who could have anyone he wanted. Their worlds weren't meant to cross. And yet, his words cut straight into her soul. She wanted to deny it, to tell herself it was just loneliness speaking, that his heart was fragile because of the silence of hospital walls. But when she looked into his eyes, she knew it was deeper. His fear was real, and it mirrored something inside her. Her heart whispered the truth. She didn't want to leave him either. "Mickelson." Her voice softened, trembling with emotion as she stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "I didn't come into this room by chance. She placed a hand gently over his, still gripping the window frame. Maybe I was meant to be here. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The silence wrapped around them, not cold this time, but tender, filled with unspoken promises. His hand loosened beneath hers, his shoulders shaking slightly as if the weight of his confession had finally lifted. And in that fragile space, Natasha realized that fate had given them both a test of fear, a test of trust, a test of love, and she had just chosen to stay. The days slipped by, and with each sunrise, Mickelson's strength slowly returned. His doctors noted progress, his vitals improved, and the shadows beneath his eyes began to fade. But Natasha knew the truth. His healing wasn't only physical. It was something deeper, something neither medicine nor machines could measure. It was the bond between them. Every time Natasha entered room 301, Mickelson's gaze would find her instantly. His piercing blue eyes no longer carried that endless emptiness. Instead, they softened, warmed, and lingered on her as though she were the only light in a world he had once believed too dark. Natasha tried to keep her heart steady, tried to remind herself she was here as a nurse, but each time his lips curved into the faintest smile, each time his voice grew gentle only for her, the walls around her heart weakened. He would watch her as she poured water, adjusted his blanket, or scribbled notes on her clipboard. Simple things, yet to him, they seemed extraordinary. To Mickelson, Natasha wasn't just caring for him. She was seeing him. One evening, the city lights outside glowed faintly through the blinds, casting silver lines across the room. Natasha entered quietly, carrying a small cup of tea. She set it carefully on the bedside table, her usual smile tugging at her lips. But tonight was different. The air was thicker, charged with something she couldn't name. Before she could step back, Mickelson reached out. His hand, warm and steady, closed gently around hers. Natasha froze, her heart skipping a beat as their eyes locked. "Natasha!" His voice trembled, but it carried more weight than any boardroom speech he had ever given. "You gave me something money never could." She swallowed hard, her chest rising sharply. "What's that?" she whispered. "Peace." His thumb brushed across her hand, tender, fragile. "For years, I've built walls so high no one could climb them. I thought that was strength. But you—" His voice cracked slightly, raw with emotion. "You walked through those walls without even trying, and suddenly, I don't want to be alone behind them anymore." Natasha's eyes blurred with tears, her throat tightening. She had never expected this. Never expected that a wrong turn could bring her into the heart of a man like him. A man who had the world in his hands, yet found himself needing hers more than anything. Mickelson drew a shaky breath, his gaze never leaving hers. "Will you stay?" His words were barely above a whisper. Then, with a courage that shook him to the core, he added, "Not just for tonight, but forever." The air seemed to still. Natasha felt her pulse race, her body trembling with the weight of his words. Her mind whispered that it was impossible. She was just a nurse. He was a billionaire, their worlds too far apart. But her heart knew the truth. She didn't want to leave him. She never had. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she smiled through the ache in her chest. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "I'll stay." The moment hung between them, fragile and eternal. Mickelson exhaled shakily, relief flooding his features as though her answer had healed something no medicine ever could. In that quiet hospital room where loneliness had once lived, two broken hearts found each other, and slowly, together, they began to heal. The day of Mickelson's discharge arrived, and the hospital corridors buzzed quietly with whispers. Nurses peeked around corners, patients lifted their heads, and staff paused in their duties, all because the billionaire everyone knew by name was finally leaving. But what no one expected was the way he left. Mickelson didn't walk out with his assistants. He didn't step into the hallway with his bodyguards, and he didn't surround himself with the air of power people always associated with him. Instead, he emerged slowly, steadying his steps, his hand firmly holding onto Natasha's. The whispers grew louder. "Is that the nurse?" someone muttered. "She's just a trainee. What is she doing with him?" another voice questioned. Natasha felt her face grow warm under the stares, but Mickelson's grip only tightened. His eyes met hers with a silent message. "Don't let go. Not now. Not ever." He looked proud, not ashamed, protective, not hesitant. For the first time in years, he wasn't the man defined by wealth, but the man defined by love. Every step they took together was a quiet rebellion against a world that judged too quickly. Some frowned, some smirked, a few even scoffed, but Mickelson lifted his chin, his voice strong despite his recent weakness. "I don't care what they say," he whispered to her. "Let them look, let them talk. All that matters is us." Natasha blinked back tears. She had never imagined her life would collide with his. She was just a girl who walked into the wrong room. And yet here she was, walking beside a billionaire who was willing to challenge the world for her. As they reached the hospital doors, the evening light spilled across them like a blessing. It wasn't golden sunlight. It was the humble glow of energy-saver lamps flickering along the walls. Yet to Natasha, it felt brighter than any chandelier she had ever seen. Together they stepped outside, hand in hand. The city traffic roared, cameras clicked from a distance, and murmurs followed them, but neither let go. In that moment, they weren't billionaire and nurse. They weren't divided by status, background, or expectations. They were simply Mickelson and Natasha, two souls who had found each other when the world least expected it. And their love told the world something money could never buy. Love doesn't measure your worth by the weight of your wallet. Love doesn't ask your last name before it chooses your heart. Love doesn't care whether you walk in through the right door or the wrong one. It only cares that you stay. That night, as society debated, whispered, and judged, their story quietly became a lesson. The lesson that true love tears down the walls people build with wealth, with pride, with prejudice. The lesson that sometimes the wrong door can open the right life. And as Natasha leaned her head against Mickelson's shoulder, she realized this wasn't just the end of a hospital stay. It was the beginning of forever.